More than 19,000 homes in the Atlanta metro area are owned by three companies that are using those single family homes as rental properties. Think about that for a moment. How does that make you feel? Are you good, bad, indifferent? What are some of the pros and cons of that? So we're going to discuss some of these things and some of the impact that it could be having on local residents and the surrounding community. But I'm going to start a little bit with my experience because I'm an Atlanta native, born and raised in the city of Atlanta, currently living still in Metro Atlanta. And so growing up in the city, I never was really exposed to living life as a renter. My parents always owned homes, at least from the time I was born, they've always owned a home. I was born in a home that both my mom and dad owned. When my parents split, we moved into another home that my mom owned. And so my parents have always been homeowners. And so we've never been renting, so to speak. It's always been an ownership thing. I don't have the experience of life with being a renter for most of my life. However, I have friends who have. I've experienced it personally, particularly when I went off to college and rented in my first apartment. And then when I first got married, my wife and I were renters for the first few years of our marriage before we purchased our first home. And so I do have personal experience with being a renter, even though most of my childhood was as a homeowner. However, when I hear a stat like more than 19,000 single family homes in the metro Atlanta area that are being used for rental purposes, it paints a different picture. One, because these are not apartment buildings that a company owns with a lot of doors and people are living in an apartment. These are single family homes, many of which a lot of people would purchase as, say, a starter home or a home for their family to live in long term in the Atlanta area. So as a whole, across the US over the last few years, home prices have really jumped up. And even though some of that huge spike in the home prices have cooled a little bit, we're still seeing a slight increase in home prices. And that's to be expected because we're in a housing shortage still. We have more people that need homes than the amount of homes that are available. And so with that, it's interesting when you have a few companies that own a large percentage. If you want to know what that percentage is, it's more than 10%. It's closer to 11% of the homes in the Atlanta metro area that are owned by three companies and corporations. There are some subdivisions that are entire subdivisions that have been bought strictly for the purpose of renting, not selling. So there are subdivisions being built in the Atlanta metro area that are being built with homes to rent out to residents in Atlanta. And so I feel that communities are better when the residents that live in the communities own the real estate, own the homes in those communities. And that can be proven statistically. Now, whether you believe that the statistics are skewed one way or another for whatever reason, statistically, if you look at areas that tend to have a higher crime rate, and those areas tend to be areas that have more renters than homeowners. And that's not just in Metro Atlanta, that's in most of the major cities across the US. Generally, the higher crime rate areas are areas where less of the people own the properties there and more of the people rent the properties there. So when I'm looking at Atlanta, which has been a city that's been growing hugely even since before the pandemic, there are a lot of businesses coming to Atlanta, a lot of industries coming to Atlanta. Atlanta's got the busiest airport in the world. You can get so many places around the world once with no stop, nonstop flights out of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, which is the airport just south of Atlanta. And so Atlanta's been growing for years now. However, you see the dynamics starting to change a lot with all of the housing, particularly single family homes, which have been bought up in large amounts by corporations that are using the properties for rentals. So how does this change? How does this affect the dynamics of the community? Well, for one, And there's a lot of speculation going on because, again, some of the fallout is still being seen as this is happening. And I shouldn't just say fallout, but some of the results are still being happening, because we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of what's happening right now. So some of the effects that it's having on the community, for one, is making it a lot harder for people who actually want to be a homeowner to find homes. During the pandemic, it was really, really hard to purchase a home. We being my wife and I, we bought our home just outside of Atlanta just before the pandemic happened, not knowing obviously that the pandemic was going to happen, but we bought towards the end of 2019. It was tough then to buy a home. We lost out on 4 other homes before we found the home that we live in now, because we were just outbid by people who were willing to pay a lot more above asking price. And it was the same thing with the home we live in now. We had to pay above asking price to get this house. The problem also came into play that when corporations who have millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to throw at real estate started bidding on homes, particularly in the metro Atlanta area, now they've got a lot more ability to be able to win those homes or win those bids, because they can throw a lot more money at it than what your average consumer can throw. So you might have a home that would have been selling for $250,000. All of a sudden, a consumer puts in an offer for $250,000, or individual who wants to purchase it for them and their family puts in an offer for $250,000. But then you have a corporation who sees, I'm gonna take that house, I'm gonna turn it into a rental, I'm gonna keep it for the next however many years and just make money off of people just renting it from me rather than them actually owning it. So they see it in a different light, and they say, we'll pay $270. We'll pay $290. We're gonna pay $20,000, $40,000 above asking price. And the seller of that home, again, it comes down to more of a transaction for them, to where they say, oh, I can get $20,000 more if I sell it to this company rather than selling it to this family. I can get $40,000 more, $50,000 more by selling my home to a corporation rather than selling it to a family who's only able to pay asking price, or maybe 5,000 above or 10,000 above asking price. And so the sellers start selling for top dollar, and then the families that want the homes for themselves and their families are left going to the next house and trying to win the next bidding war. But they might be in another bidding war for even more money that they can't afford. And then it just starts to become really discouraging for a lot of homeowners. And so I tell these stories because these are actual stories. These are not hypothetical situations. These are actual stories from actual people that I've spoken with who have lost out on 10 different homes. I've talked to other mortgage lenders who have pre-approved buyers, and their buyers left the market they stopped looking to purchase a home altogether. I talked to some lenders who said that after the 10th offer, after the 15th offer, their buyers just got so discouraged by being outbid by another corporation or another person who's willing to pay 20, 40, 50,000 above asking, that they just said, forget it, I'm leaving the market. And so part of the effect that it has is that with us being in an inventory shortage already, now you've got 3 corporations that are buying up 10%. That's a huge percentage of the single family homes in an area that could be used to help people find homes for their families who actually want to be homeowners. And so again, with the corporations, we're in a capitalist society. And so with that, there are a lot of pros. There are also some cons as well. And one of those is there's nothing illegal that's going on, but there is something that is affecting the livelihood of the residents that live there that would like to become homeowners. Now, not everyone is in a disagreement with what's happening. There are some people that are indifferent. There are some people that are for what's happening, because there are individuals who don't want to own a home. There are individuals who just want to rent. They don't want the responsibilities of owning a home. They want to live somewhere. Maybe they want to live in a single family home, but they don't want to own that home. So they'd rather a corporation or a company own that home. And when something needs to be fixed, hey, they call up the corporation, they call up the company, they call the landlord. roof needs to be replaced. We've got a leaking pipe. We've got a problem with the HVAC, whatever it might be. Grass needs to be cut if that's something that's not taken care of by the tenant that's living there. They have the freedom of not having to worry about the maintenance and upkeep of the home itself. So you do have some people that are pro what's going on because, again, they are not wanting to be homeowners. They want to pass that off to the responsibilities of homeownership. They want to pass off to someone else. And then you have the group of people that are heavily affected by what's going on because the more homes that are being bought up by these three corporations, the fewer homes that are available in the metro Atlanta area for people to actually be able to purchase. And so with the people that, regardless of what side of the fence you stand on, one of the things that I do want to point out is the pros and some of the cons of what's coming or of what's happening. So on the pro side, as mentioned, you do have the maintenance and upkeep that you don't have to worry about when you're not the homeowner. You're not worrying about again, all this stuff with the roof needs to be fixed. There's whatever happens maintenance and upkeep wise that you're not responsible for as a tenant. It's the responsibility of whoever owns that home or whatever corporation owns that home. That's on the pro side. I don't have too many other pros other than that, to be honest, because I see a lot more cons than pros when you have a lot of big corporations controlling all of the real estate for an area where people are wanting to live, and particularly a lot of those people are also wanting to become homeowners. So on the con side, for one, we talked about the inventory shortage that we're in and how this further exacerbates the housing crisis that we're in with the shortage of inventory. So on another front of a con that we have with what's being created right now is the control that a corporation and a company has over an area when they own most of the real estate in that area. So again, when you have entire subdivisions, and in some cases it is an entire subdivision that a corporation or a company owns, now the rent for that is controlled by that entire company or that entire corporation. Rent will continue to increase in perpetuity forever. We're not going to get to a time where all of a sudden rent just hits a ceiling and rent doesn't go up anymore. Rent will forever increase. So when you are renting, you will forever continually pay increases in your rent year to year to year. On average, between 2 to 5% a year is when rents usually increase. On average, you might have some years where it jumps up a higher. You might have some years where it jumps lower. You might have some years where it stays pretty consistent. But on average, if you average out a bunch of years, on average, it's about 2 to 5% year over year that rent is increasing. So we will forever have rent increases. How does that affect the citizens of an area who are now having to rent if they wanted to become homeowners but can't find homes to purchase? Now they have to rent, and not only are they paying rent and the increases in rent over the years, they're not building equity. That's the other con that I see with this situation, where you have a city of renters or a large city of corporations who own single family homes that are creating a situation where now more people are being forced to rent because they can't find homes to buy in the city where they work and live. One of those things is that these individuals who would like to become homeowners are now not able to build the equity in their homes, which is really where a lot of the benefit of home ownership comes from. I purchased my first home back in 2014, and one of the huge things, I still own the first home that I purchased, but one of the big things that has been a huge benefit with that home is, again, it's been where most of my net worth is the equity that's in the home, meaning the value that's in the home, what it's worth versus what I owe on the home. So for example, if you purchase a home for $300,000, and you keep that home for, let's say, 10 years or even 5 years. Let's say 5 years from now, that home's not worth 300,000. Let's say it's worth 370,000. Then that's $70,000 worth of equity that you now have in that home. In addition to the fact that you've been making on-time monthly mortgage payments, a portion of that mortgage payment goes toward paying down the principal balance of the loan and thereby putting more equity in your home, because you don't own 300, you didn't purchase the home at 300,000. It goes up, now it's worth $370,000 and you still owe 300. No, after that 5 years, you owe a little bit less than $300,000. After 10 years, you owe even a little bit less than $300,000. So now you've got that home where it's worth 370, but now you may only owe 280 on it or 270. So now you've got $100,000 worth of equity in that home. So you can see how this is something that can really play to your benefit when you own a home long term, with being able to build that equity through the value of the property going up and also through you making on-time monthly mortgage payments. There are people that are sitting with hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in their homes that if they wanted to, they could sell their home and get hundreds of thousands of dollars coming to them. They could take out some of that money through a home equity loan, home equity line of credit, or a cash out refinance. And they could access some of that equity in their home and use that money to go and purchase another home, or to go and take a vacation, or to go put their kid through college. There's so many things you can do with the equity in your home to help make your life whatever you would have it to be. But that's one of the big things that is missing when you are not able to purchase a home, is the equity that is not going to get built up. There's also one of the cons is the stability. So when you're renting, like I mentioned earlier, you do have those steady increases in rent that are happening year over year over year on average. Now, when you own a home, your monthly mortgage payment, the principal and interest does not change for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. That principal and interest is set, permanent. It does not change. So your monthly mortgage payment in most instances is not going to have huge fluctuations in it. What you might have changed is that your taxes might go up. In some cases, your insurance might go up, but you can always shop around for a lower insurance policy or a better insurance policy, or you can change your insurance policy to get it back to where you need it to be. However, your taxes may go up a little bit, but your taxes are a smaller portion of your overall mortgage payment, which is mostly principal and interest, and the principal and interest does not change. That offers you a lot of stability when it comes to owning your home, because now you don't have those gradual increases year over year over year. So one of the things that a lot of people look at when it comes to purchasing a home is they say, hey, it's cheaper to rent than what it is to buy. That is true initially in many cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, in many cases, that is true, that at the beginning, at the onset, it can be cheaper to rent than to buy. 7 years down the road, that would not have been the case if you had purchased when it was cheaper to rent than to buy. And what I mean is that, let's say you purchase a single family home, 3-bed, 2-bath, 4-bed, 2.5-bath, 3-bed, whatever, it doesn't matter. You purchase a single family home, and that home, let's say to rent that home is going to cost you $2,000 a month to rent. But let's say if you were to pay a mortgage for purchasing that home, let's say that mortgage is going to cost you $2,500, $2,700. Let's say it cost you $3,000. Now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now, keep adding the 2.5% to 5% onto that $2,000 rent. So 7 years from now, you're not going to be paying $2,000 in rent. You might be paying $2,500. You might be paying $2,700. You might be paying closer to $3,000 10, 12 years from now. Whereas if you had bought that home back when it was cheaper to rent than to buy, but you went ahead and bought the home, then a decade from now, you would have a home where your monthly mortgage payment, again, your principal and interest is not changing. So your monthly mortgage payment is still about the same as what it was when you bought it. However, rent has caught up, if not exceeded, your monthly mortgage payment. And so that's one of the disadvantages, but that's not the only thing is the monthly mortgage payment. Remember, we also talked about the equity. That home that you bought is now possibly worth 50, 100, $150,000 more than when you bought it a decade prior. So now, in addition to having the same, if not a lower mortgage payment than what the current rent is 10 years from now, now you're also sitting on $150,000 worth of equity in your home that you can have work for you. And that's some of the huge benefit of being a homeowner and having that asset at your disposal. And yes, I use the word asset, even for the home that you live in. There are a lot of people that believe, oh, it's not an asset if you live in it. It's only an asset if you're renting it and making money on it. I completely disagree. It is an asset because of what it can provide for you, what it can do for you. And I also believe that an asset and a liability is not strictly determined on a monetary basis with finances. There are so many other benefits and value that comes from things that are assets, not just tied to a dollar amount, but there's an emotional aspect to it. There is a generational aspect to it, because if I purchase a home, let's say I don't ever take any of the equity out, and you might say, oh, it's a liability, but then I take that home and I give it to my child. Now my child has a home that's rent free. How does that allow my child to then go and pursue the dreams and the things that they're really passionate about that God has put on the inside of them? How does that free them up to then go and pursue those things, knowing that they can live somewhere without having to work a job they hate or don't like in order to pay a mortgage? And I'm not saying that there's benefit that can come from, rolling up your sleeves and working a job, particularly one that's getting the bills paid. However, how does it free you up to really pursue the passions that are inside of you, that if you don't have a monthly mortgage payment to worry about, if you don't have monthly rent to worry about? So again, you may say, oh, that's a liability, but I'm looking at it as an asset. What if I just allow the equity to continue to build up in that home, and my kid gets ready to go off to college? It's going to cost $100,000 for them to go off to college. Where am I going to get that money? Oh, you know what? I didn't have to try and figure out how to save the money. Yes, there are other ways that you can invest in, putting away money in a 529, college investment plan, or investing in some of the other ways that you can save for college. But another way is by me owning a home, because I already need a place to live that's increasing in value, and I'm paying down the mortgage, and that's putting equity in the house, and I can tap into that equity and pay for my kid to go to college. There are so many different ways that I see the home that you live in as being able to be an asset for you. So I just say that I've got a whole nother video, you can go and listen to it, that talking about asset versus liability, and if the home you live in is an asset or a liability. So you can go watch that video. But again, how much does that do for you to have the home that you live in and the asset and all that it provides to you? So with that, just wanted to kind of paint this picture, because Atlanta right now has got a lot of stuff that's going on. This was one of the things that was at the forefront of real estate, and that's been hitting the news recently as well. And so Atlanta's leading the nation right now in terms of corporations that own a large share of the single family homes in a city. One last thing I did want to say also, I've spoken with people who believe, again, that this is a good thing, that you don't need to own a home, that you should just rent. And it gives you freedom to be able to move about where you want to move and go where you want to go and do where you want to do what you want to do. Historically, home ownership has been tied to wealth. You can go back to biblical times. His home ownership has been something that has been tied to wealth. Owning land, owning property is something that has been always tied to wealth. Even today, in the modern society in which we live, packed in cities, stacked on top of each other in condos and everything like that, I still believe that owning land, owning property is still tied to wealth. With all the buildings that we have and all the modernization of the world that we live in today, still owning property. I mean, even in the downtown areas, if you own the condo, that's a huge asset that you have. If you own a parking lot downtown, that is a huge asset because people charge enormous, they make a killing off of paying people just to park on a lot. You don't even have maintenance and upkeep for that. You just hire someone to ticket the cars who try to park there illegally or to collect cash from people who need a place to park. That's a huge asset to have, to just own a parking lot. But again, you're owning real estate. So I think even today in the modern times that we're living in, owning real estate is still a huge asset to own. But one other point that I want to make to that is that it's interesting how some of the individuals that I've spoken with that have iterated to me that you don't need to own a home. It's better to rent. The cost of renting is cheaper than the cost of owning. It's interesting that those points are made by, just regular Americans like you and me. However, companies and corporations that are multi-million, multi-billion dollar companies and corporations, meanwhile, are buying up large amounts of real estate. Why? Because they see the value in it. They see the value in owning a lot of land and then renting that land out to people who need homes. You own something that people need. It's different than owning a business and trying to sell a product or trying to sell your service. A home is one of the basic needs, and everybody needs a home. Well, there's only so much land in an area. It's not like everybody needs clothing too, but you know what? There are a lot of different places I can get clothes from. There are a lot of different ways that I can, purchase something to clothe my body in different ways, depending upon my style and what I like to wear and everything. However, when it comes to real estate, there's a limited amount of real estate. You can't get land from one place and bring it over to another place. You can't, real estate doesn't work like that. It's one of the unique things about real estate is that it's unique to the area that the real estate is in. If you want to be by the beach, one of the reasons that beachfront property typically costs more is because it's more sought after. It's a nice property, but it's also unique in the fact that you can't purchase real estate in Atlanta. You can't purchase real estate in a landlocked city and have beachfront property. That's not how it works. Real estate is unique to the area. So if Atlanta is an area where people are wanting to be, then that real estate is going to continue to increase in value according to the demand that's placed on it. And so real estate is something that, again, a lot of these corporations, multi-million and billion-dollar corporations, are buying up a lot of real estate because they see the value in owning something that people need. You need to have a place to live. And if I can control that and have all of the people in this area renting from me, renting their homes from me, renting their apartments, their condos, whatever it is, they're renting it from me, then now that's a huge amount of leverage that I have in a city as a whole. As a corporation who owns 3% of a city, which is still a huge part of a city for one corporation to own. But as a corporation who owns that large of a percentage of a city, especially a huge city like Atlanta, you own that much of the rental properties in Atlanta. That's a huge amount of leverage that you can have over the people in that city. How much can you now control rent a little bit more in an area when you own all of the properties in a subdivision? So for people who are thinking that, oh, it's not important to own a home anymore, you should just rent. It's cheaper to rent. It's not feasible to buy. It is very much feasible to buy. It's possible to buy. There are ways that the state of Georgia is trying to make it more accessible for people to buy through down payment assistance. I'll speak about one of them now. The Georgia Dream program, which many people may have heard, is down payment assistance. Georgia Dream offers down payment assistance. Typically, they used to offer it to just lower to middle income families. They recently came out with another program which increased the limits to go to, I believe it's 150% of the area median income. So basically it increases the limits to homes that, or families that make, individuals or families that make higher than what the area median income is. They can still receive down payment assistance to help them be able to purchase a home. So there are programs out there that can help you purchase a home if you want to be a homeowner, but there is value in owning a home. There is value in having that real estate as an asset to be able to, again, draw from, to build generational wealth for yourself, for your family, to be able to put your kids through school, to be able to do whatever it is that you desire to do with it, to fulfill whatever purpose it is that you have in life, or whatever dreams or goals you're aiming to achieve. But don't miss the boat in terms of thinking that, oh, we don't need it anymore. We live in a modern society. We're more nomads, where we don't need a place to live that we own. We can just move from place to place to place to place to place. I think that's the mistake that you're going to make. And a lot of corporations and companies realize, nope, you're always going to need a place to stay. And the people who own the land have the control of the rent, and they have the control of the rules and the laws that are happening in that area as well. If I own an entire subdivision, I control the rules of that subdivision. I control the people that live in that subdivision, and I control what they pay to me to live in that subdivision. So these are some of the things that you want to be aware of, at least consider when you're seeing things like this going on, in terms of how important is it for you to actually own a home, whether it's a home that you own and live in long term, or that you own it and then you rent it out and then go move somewhere else, or sell it and then go move somewhere else. Whatever it is, realize there is value in real estate. There's value in home ownership. That's all I have for you in this episode. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. It helps me to be able to push this out to a lot more people. And take care. Be blessed. We'll see you in the next episode.